Hi there, welcome to lesson 16 where I'm going to introduce another term that you should never ever use in your legal, business, general, academic English writing, and that is provided that. Now this might surprise some of you. Provided that. Why is this a problem? Well, it's a problem in exactly the same way that and or is a problem. In that the courts have understood provided that in three different ways. Mostly the courts understand provided that as we understand it, in other words, as if, creating a condition. In my experience, this is about 85 to 90% of the time. When we use provided that, we mean to say if. However, surprisingly commonly, about 10% of the time, something like that in my experience, provided that is actually creating an exception of some kind, where we should be saying something like except when, or however, or but. But we use provided that instead, and then that causes a problem. And then in very rare circumstances, certainly I meet this circumstance about once or twice a year, something like that, provided that actually means and. It is rare, it is unusual, but trust me, the courts and in my own personal experience, we have seen this to mean and. And of course, the argument is clear. If you have a word which is ambiguous, you can cause confusion. If you use a word which causes confusion, then the parties to the agreement might understand it in different ways, and then you have a dispute. If you use a clear, precise alternative, then the dispute is avoided. Which means when it does get to dispute, the judge then has to understand the context and then try to understand what provided that means, which party has understood provided that correctly. And judges, as you might have guessed from the and or video, they hate being dictionaries. Judges are there to rule on law, not to define words. Let me give you an example. You can keep your pets in your student flat provided that you have written permission from the university. A classic example. If you want to say if, just say if. If is a legal word, it's a professional word, it's a business word, everyone understands it. Use if. So what are the teaching tips? Firstly, never use provided that. Just don't do it. Don't use provided that. Don't use provided however that. Don't use any other structure that in which you can form provided that. And if you read legal writing quite a lot, you'll see that providing that comes in different forms. It's better to use the clear alternative that you really are trying to say. If you're creating a condition, except when, if you're trying to create an exception or introduce a contrast of some kind. And in the questions to this unit, you'll see some examples of that. And if you really mean to say and, then say and. Another option which is open to you is simply to redraft. Use a list, use a table. Think about a different way of structuring what it is that you want to say. And short sentences here are your friend. Okay, and the two excuses from the last video, I have to repeat them again because they are true. Okay, everyone else does it and natives use it, will never be acceptable excuses, ever. Okay, native lawyers make mistakes. You have to understand this. And native lawyers also know, or should also know, that provided that is a legal English error. So just because they continue to make errors doesn't mean that you have to just follow them blindly and make the same error. Okay, so the questions are all going to be about reading the sentences, thinking about the use of provided that and trying to work out what it means in each context. So rewrite the sentences below which use provided that. I've tried to create contexts which will make it more clear that there is an exception. However, there is no one correct answer. These are open to interpretation. If we had much more context, then of course we could say with more certainty, provided that means this. But because there's no wider context, we will have to make our best educated guess with the information that we have. Just by way of example, anyone may apply to be a police officer provided that they meet the criteria to join should really be, I think, anyone may apply to be a police officer if they meet the criteria to join. Or you might decide to redraft and come up with a different sentence structure, like, to be a police officer, you have to meet the criteria to join. Okay, have a look at the sentences below, think about those uses of provided that, and when you've done that, have a look at my suggested answer video.